Welcome to the Australian Museum's Lizard Island Research Station. Around 270 kilometres north of Cairns and the most northerly scientific research station on the Great Barrier Reef. Here, through the efforts of researchers who visit from all over the world, we are finding out how coral reefs work. The Great Barrier Reef is home to more than 1,500 species of fishes and around 400 species of hard corals. The reefs built by corals provide habitats that support an enormous variety of other species, from giant clams to microscopic life forms. Corals are remarkable animals because their tissues contain plant cells that capture solar energy and transform it into food. The coral animal uses this energy to clone itself into colonies that over millennia build the massive structure of the reef. These coral barriers protect coasts and communities throughout the tropical world. The lives of many millions of people are directly connected to coral reefs. They have high economic value to the tourism and fishing industries. The Great Barrier Reef alone provides billions of dollars each year to the Australian economy and directly supports many tens of thousands of jobs. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on the planet, extending over 2,600 kilometres. It is made up of nearly 3,000 individual reefs. The present living reef structure is only about 8,000 years old. It formed when rising seas enveloped the continental shelf at the end of the last ice age. It covers the skeleton of former coral reefs that died when the waters receded more than 100,000 years ago. Lizard Island is a high continental island situated in the remote north. It is an important site for Aboriginal people who have visited it over thousands of years. The remains of their shellfish meals can be found in many places around the island. The first European to visit was the famous navigator James Cook. In 1770, he climbed to the island's peak and became the first European to grasp the enormity of the Great Barrier. He also named Lizard Island after the large goannas that are still common here. Reefs are a biological gold mine, so it's no surprise that they attract the interest of scientists. How did one of the best coral reef research stations in the world come to be established at Lizard Island? The Australian Museum in Sydney has a strong history of research into coral reefs, and it seized an opportunity to develop a new reef research station in the early 1970s. At that time, the only research facilities were at the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. The museum correctly surmised that things would be different at the northern end, more than 1,000 kilometres away, so it chose Lizard Island as the site of its new station, which opened in 1973. The continental shelf is narrow in this part of the reef, so researchers have unrivalled access to all reef types, from muddy inshore reefs to the spectacular outer barrier reefs. To develop the station from a collection of tents into a permanent facility, financial help was needed, so the Lizard Island Reef Research Foundation was established in 1978. The foundation has attracted numerous supporters who have enabled the station to mature into a well-equipped, highly productive and internationally recognised facility. About 100 research projects are now conducted each year, involving more than 300 people from many countries. A small number of student groups also use the facility for educational programs. Four self-contained houses accommodate up to 37 visitors. The houses have been designed to blend with the environment and to provide simple yet comfortable living conditions. Food supplies arrive by barge from the mainland every 2 weeks. Visitors have to order their food in advance and cook and clean up after themselves. The duration of a research trip varies from a week to many months. Many researchers make repeated visits, and some have been using the station on a regular basis for decades. All users pay a daily fee that cover most of the station's operating expenses. The station's staff is very small, just 2 directors and 2 maintenance personnel. They are the glue that keeps the station running for the continuous and ever-changing stream of visitors. The directors ensure that visitors are well prepared for their visits and that they carry out their work responsibly and safely. Every visit requires a lot of advanced planning and orientation on site. Researchers need permits to work within the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, and they must meet stringent regulations for boating and diving. It's also important to ensure that one person's research does not impact on another's. The maintenance staff keep all buildings and equipment at the station in good working order and help look after the visitors. They are often assisted by wonderful volunteers. Sunsets and the weekly barbecue bring the whole community together. It's a time to relax and to make new friends. Many scientific collaborations have been forged in the collegial atmosphere of the Lizard Island Research Station. The reef itself is the main laboratory, so boats and diving gear are essential tools. Small dinghies are the daily workhorses for the majority of researchers whose studies take place around Lizard Island itself. Field research encompasses a large variety of tasks, from making simple observations to deploying sophisticated instruments and running manipulative experiments. About 4,000 dives are made each year from the station. Larger craft are available for student groups and for researchers who need to access more distant sites. After a dive, researchers bring data and samples back to the station for further analysis and observation. Time in the field is valuable, so there is no point doing things at Lizard Island that can be done back at the researchers' home institutions. For this reason, the station's laboratories are fitted out with the equipment that is needed for working with living organisms and for preserving specimens for transport. The station's seawater aquarium system is pivotal to the success of many projects. Here, researchers can observe and conduct experiments on marine life. The continuous flow of seawater from the lagoon means that conditions in the aquarium are very similar to those on the reef. Researchers can also easily manipulate particular environmental variables such as temperature, light, food, and pH. Other facilities include the library, which contains an excellent selection of reference books and scientific papers, computer facilities, and a seminar room. All these resources are important assets for researchers and for student groups. Coral reef science was in its infancy when the research station was established. Since then, we have learned an enormous amount about coral reefs. We've discovered the existence of one of nature's most spectacular events, the annual mass coral spawning, which occurs mainly on a single night each year. It is through this event that immobile corals are able to reproduce themselves, disperse, and colonize new areas. We've learned a lot about the lives of fishes, including commercially important ones such as the coral trout. We now know that these fish change sex during their lives, and that a larger fish is not necessarily an older fish. They keep to a relatively small home range for most of the year, but will swim kilometres to join annual spawning aggregations. This sort of information is absolutely basic to developing sensible plans to manage fishery resources. Light traps are valuable tools that are used frequently at Lizard Island for fish studies. Left out overnight, light traps capture a soup of new recruits to the reef fish community. From studying these recruits, we've discovered that the larvae of reef fishes are not just passive particles going wherever the currents take them. Instead, these tiny fish, only 1 or 2 centimetres long, are strong swimmers, and they can sense the location of reefs from afar by sound and smell. After a few weeks in open water, they need to settle onto the reef and change into an adult fish. They can choose where they do this, and they can time it to avoid the many predators on coral reefs. Understanding these intricate life traits of small reef fish has important implications for the management of reef resources. We've also discovered that some living things have particularly important jobs to do to keep the whole coral reef system working effectively. These include inconspicuous plants that help to bind the coral reef structure together, fishes that bite chunks off the reef and so create bare space where new organisms can get a foothold, and cleaner fish that help to keep many species of reef fish healthy by removing parasites from them. More than 60 scientific papers are published each year from the work done at Lizard Island. This information adds greatly to our ability to manage and conserve coral reefs and their fisheries. Knowledge gained at Lizard Island is useful not only for managing the Great Barrier Reef. Many of the principles learned here can be used elsewhere to help conserve reefs in other parts of the world. Although we have learned a lot since the 1970s, it is now more critical than ever to develop our understanding of how coral reefs function. More and more, coral reefs are being impacted by natural and human-induced stresses. Runoff from the land brings pesticides, fertilisers and silt onto reefs. This kills some organisms, causes blooms of others, and reduces the amount of light that is so important to corals and the many other reef animals who rely upon symbiotic plants. Overexploitation of reef resources can result in what ecologists term a phase shift from a coral-based to a seaweed-based system, and a subsequent dramatic loss of biodiversity. High temperature and other environmental stresses can cause mass coral bleaching and mass death of corals. This occurs when symbiotic plants living within the corals change from producing food to producing a toxin, resulting in their expulsion. Increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is making the oceans more acidic. This reduces the ability of corals to build their skeletons and impacts the behaviour of reef fish in ways that we are just beginning to understand. Today, Lizard Island researchers are at the forefront in tackling these and other pressing issues. The Australian Museum's Lizard Island Research Station, with the support of the Lizard Island Reef Research Foundation and its numerous donors, plays a vital role in providing the facilities needed by scientists to work on the reef.